Thanks, King, for having me. I intentionally told King not to do an introduction because I'm actually going to go through some of my experience. I think it's very relevant to what I'm doing now, so I'm going to walk you guys through that. And I apologize, my slides are kind of shitty. Didn't have a ton of time putting it. I put a lot of thought into the content, not a lot of thought into the PowerPoint, unfortunately. So I did my bachelor's at UC Berkeley. I graduated in 2008 with a degree in political science and history. During that time, I worked pretty closely with the American Civil Liberties Union. Berkeley has a chapter here, but also worked really closely with the Northern California chapter, which is based in San Francisco. I ultimately, as I was sort of graduating from Berkeley, served on their board of directors for about 3.5 years. So simultaneously, post-undergrad, I worked at Google in Mountain View. I worked on their patent licensing and acquisition team. Really interesting time to be there. We worked on the Motorola deal, a bunch of Samsung, Android patents, really interesting time. I left Google and traveled the world for, about like 4 to 6 months, working for various international development organizations. And then came back to Berkeley and did the Master's in Public Policy program here. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with that program, but it's a 2-year full-time program. Happy to talk more about that later if you're interested. I graduated from there last year, so last summer. My internship between my first and second year was with UNICEF. They're a large international development organization. I was working in Calcutta, India. So I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about some of the current projects I'm working on. And so those projects are will speak to a lot of the advice on successes and failures that I have. The first project that I'm working on is called GiveMob, and King actually interned for us over the summer, which is awesome. GiveMob is a mobile app for iPhone and Android, and our goal is to make giving on mobile as easy and accessible as possible. I think this is really cool. We just got mentioned in Fast Company pretty recently, which is fun, and we got lots of downloads, which is why it was awesome. So a couple of years back, Apple came out and said absolutely no donations through their apps. No one's going to donate through apps. You have to go out of the app to do it, which really sucks because you think about all the things people do in app, like ordering cars or food, or people find dates through apps these days as well. And so that really sucked. And so basically what they did was they put a provision in there that said, fine, like people can donate through apps only if it's through text to donate. And so what we did was tap into that. We process all of our payments through text to donate, so you can actually donate in app. The interesting thing to know about GiveMob is that it's only $5 or $10 increments that you can donate to, so we sort of appeal to a younger audience. Actually, we meant to appeal to a younger audience. What we've actually found is that our user base actually skews young and actually very old, so we have a ton of seniors using our app as well, which actually sort of makes sense if you think about it intuitively. So that's the first project I'm working on. Let me give you a little bit more about that. We launched version 1 in February of this year. We have several thousand users now. We have dozens of nonprofit partners. Thousands of dollars have been committed on our platform. We are launching version 2 late this year, so I hope to have a live version 2 with sort of updated design and better sort of UI by early next year. Crowd Defend is another project I'm working on. We launched in about 3 weeks, so this is actually the first time I'm talking about this publicly to not investors. We are a small team based in San Francisco. It's me and 3 other folks. Everyone else on my team is technical. Crowd Defend is a crowdfunding platform for legal services and fees. Our idea is sort of rooted in this idea that access to justice is incredibly hard for most middle and lower class Americans. The average price of an attorney in the US is about $500 to $600. There's some really important social justice cases that go up to national, state Supreme Courts daily. And so our idea is, instead of having special interests sort of tap into those into that, we want the crowd to be able to have their say in for example, reproductive justice or social justice or environmental justice case that they are interested in. So we're pre-launch. We're launching in about 3 weeks. We're actually in the process of raising our seed round right now. Hope to have that wrapped up in the next 3 or 4 weeks. Yeah. So I wanted to give you guys a background on the projects I'm working on, because all the experience I'm going to all the advice I'm going to give you guys is really based on these two experiences. Finding your passion. So I'm just going to read this quote for you guys. Passion means a deep personal attraction to something, a strong affinity or enthusiasm that can lead to profound enjoyment or fulfillment. I think passion is probably one of the most important qualities of an entrepreneur. I'm sure you guys have heard that from other speakers. I don't know if you have, but I really want to drive that home. Being an entrepreneur in whatever capacity is incredibly hard, especially when you're talking about startups and raising money from for-profit investors. And you have to be really, really damn sure that what you're doing is something you're really crazy passionate about. And so I get this question sometimes, like, how did you think about crowdfunding, or like, why did you decide to do this? I think the culmination of so many things in my career brought me to this point where I wanted to pursue crowdfund. And I think like the one tangible piece of advice I would give people is read everything you can about things that you're passionate about, like consume tons of media on it, whatever it is, like watch documentaries, read articles, read books, talk to people, whatever that is. And then the second piece of advice is push yourself to consume content that you normally wouldn't. I think everything that I've done professionally has really been about bridging sort of different issue areas, right? So I mean, even thinking about crowdfund, the project I'm working on now is really a bridge between like some of the work I did at Google and the sort of work I did at the ACLU. So really thinking about other sectors really critically as well is really important. I think the best thing you can do for yourself is get a subscription to The Economist or buy The Economist and read it, even if you think all the articles are really boring. Read every article in there and you'll be far better off than most people. And then just talk to people, like find out what people care about and find out why they care about it. I mean, you don't have to ask them why they care about it. Find out what people are passionate about, and then go find out why somebody would be passionate about that. So I'm gonna do a small exercise. It's kind of a corny exercise, but I think it might be useful. Hopefully you guys aren't all sitting next to your friends. Are you guys sitting all next to your friends? Probably, okay. Just turn to that person next to you and share one thing that you're really passionate about. And like that could be anything, like that can be fitness or food, or I don't know, for me, obviously it's philanthropy and social justice. So just like one thing, and then we're gonna have people share them, so don't say anything too embarrassing. Just kidding. The temperature room. Anyone want to volunteer? Sure.
Disaster preparedness. I thought was very interesting.
Awesome.
And there's also virtual reality.
Cool. Very nice.
I was just going to say education reform.
Mm-hmm.
And branding.
Yeah,
branding.
Cool. Like one more.
This is Justine. Great. She's passionate about listening to people's stories.
Okay.
And this is Kai, and he is passionate about nutrition, medicine, and like that in conjunction with business and helping people just in a holistic approach.
Awesome. That's so interesting. That's such a diverse group. Reason why they're passionate about that topic. Cool. So finding your passion, I think, is hugely important. Like, you have to be really committed to what you're doing to sort of see the process through, especially again when you get to the investor process and everyone, people start really poking holes in your whether it's your idea or your product or whatever. Be 100% sure. And so, as you're going through this process of really exploring what it is that you are interested in, you obviously want to start identifying pain points or problems and really thinking critically about what that is, like why, like when are you hitting roadblocks? So for me, again, I'm passionate about philanthropy. I like to give. I don't have millions of dollars to give, but I think giving is an important part of my life and who I am, and I couldn't give on mobile, which really bothered me because I do everything on mobile. And so it's really like being aware of those things, like really trying to open your eyes and see those things for what they are. Cool. So recruiting your team, this is another big thing that I just went through recently. So again, at Crowd Defend, it's me and 3 other folks, and you're bad at. Sometimes you inflate what you're really good at. And I think putting all that down on a piece of paper will really sort of tell you a lot about yourself. And then you guys are in a perfect setting, of course, given that you're in school, to get feedback from other people. So if you have classes that are small, you can get feedback from professors, from teammates on class projects and from clubs. Like, take that opportunity to ask people like what it was about your contribution that they liked. I think if you can do that early on, you'll be far ahead of most people. Like, you'll find that when you get into the workplace, and I'm sure some of you have already worked internships and whatnot, but when you're like actually full time, you'll be surprised by what people think they can do but can't. And if you're like about that, not that good at. I think also getting feedback, so not only from professors and people in the classroom, but also outside of the classroom as well. Just so totally. I had a really good friend tell me like a couple weeks ago, I was going through this exercise myself and my team, like really to understand, what were our blind spots. So we now have a small team. Like, what am I good at? What are you good at? What are we lacking? Kind of thing. And it's funny because I had a friend that told me, you're very blunt. You're too blunt, and that's like that to me. That's a weakness, and I had to put it on my weakness column. But I would never have known that if a friend who was like, I've never worked with professionally hadn't told me that. Obviously, being too blunt in a professional setting is never a good idea. So really takes time to like make that list for yourself. Like, put it in a Google Doc. Keep it dynamic. You're obviously going to be learning as you go. It'll be useful. Another reason that that exercise is useful is because once you start recruiting, especially when you start, I don't know if you guys are interested in, taking a step back. Are you guys interested in tech? Like, are you guys wanting to, build technical products? Yeah. So that list is going to be hugely helpful once you start hiring for technical roles. If you're not technical yourself, even if you are technical yourself, you're going to need obviously other support. So, so obviously finding a technical founder is a must. You need to find someone that's going to compensate your skills, not only your sort of business skills, but your technical skills as well. If you are a non-technical person, so if you're a Haas or you're thinking about Haas and you want to build a tech product, there's no way that you should get around finding a technical co-founder. I was in your seat so too long ago, and I remember people being like, oh yeah, we're 2 Haas students, we're going to build this this tech platform. And I think you can do it. It's just going to be way harder. So when you think about what you want to build, and if it is something that has a technical component, everything has a technical component. Even if you're selling like t-shirts, you're going to have a website, you're going to have an e-commerce site or whatever. You have to find yourself a technical co-founder to compensate for your skills. So another thing about technical co-founders, only because I not recently in the last year or so, recruited a technical co-founder, was that you have to know what kind of technical co-founder you're looking for. This is something I certainly didn't know. Maybe this is very obvious to some people, but 2 years ago, if you were like, hey, like, what kind of technical co-founder do you need? I would be like, I need a software engineer. Like, what kind of software engineer do you need? I don't know. I have no idea. So as you're thinking about like this passion that you have and the problem that you have, and you're thinking about like, okay, now how do I compensate for those skills that I'm lacking? And you are thinking about bringing a technical co-founder on board, think about what skills you need that person to have. And that means like, what language are they going to speak? And I think once you do find somebody that may be able to join your team, you're going to be able to bring something to the table. So you'll be able to say like, hey, I want to build this platform. I think that we want to build it in Python with Django front end or something. And that didn't mean anything to me like a year and a half ago. But I went through this process where I was looking for a technical co-founder, and like, not all technical co-founders are created equal in a sense. They don't all speak the same language. So figure out what you're looking for, and then like if you are technical, figure out who's going to compensate for your skills. And then one other thing about co-founders, especially technical co-founders, if you're non-technical, make sure that you are finding a technical co-founder that's joining you for the right reasons. Not because they want to start a startup, not because they just want to make tons of money. That's a great reason too, but I mean, you should have someone join you just because they want to make a lot of money or they want to add it to their resume. I think like spending time with a potential technical co-founder and like really delving into like why it is that you're passionate about it and like maybe why they'd be passionate about it is a really important exercise. Just personally, I actually went through a technical co-founder before the co-founder that I have now, and I didn't do this exercise with them. So this is like almost a year ago now. I didn't do this exercise with them where I was like, why are you passionate about social justice and access to the legal system? And I just assumed that he was, and that absolutely wasn't the case. And I ended up finding a technical co-founder now who's awesome and is actually very much sort of on the same page as me. And this obviously goes back to this whole idea of like starting something on your own is really hard. And you want to have someone that's going to like be there with you. So make sure you take that time to share that with them. Like when I was recruiting the technical co-founder I have now, I actually sent him all these documentaries and articles and books. Like I actually went and bought books that I had already read and checked out from the library, bought them for him, like printed out all the articles that I had read about the space, like sent him a list of Netflix and HBO documentaries on the legal space. And I think it took him like 3 weeks to consume all that content. And like he wasn't doing anything. He was working at the time at another job, but like in 3 weeks was like, okay, I get it. Like I get why this is important. So go through that exercise. It'll save you a lot of hassle down the road. Another thing about teams is think about advisors. So as you're thinking about, again, like you're thinking about this problem you have and you found a technical co-founder, think about advisors. Like you guys are in a perfect position to recruit advisors right now. You have professors that are really smart. You have lecturers. You have other classmates, graduate students, whatever. Advisors are, I think, critical, and I don't think they get enough credit. I think investors obviously get a lot of credit and they're obviously advisors in some ways, but find domain expert advisors. So again, like if you're really interested in nutrition, find someone who is a doctor who is like the best nutritionist that you can come in contact with. And I think that that's really important. Like we have a number of advisors on for both the projects I'm working on. Some are technical and some are domain experts. Obviously, so for CrowdDefend, my technical co-founder is fairly senior, but obviously no one knows everything. And so we even have a technical advisor who is like on board just to like, hey, we ran into this like technical problem. What would you do here? What path would you take? And then of course we have legal advisors and social justice advisors as well. So yeah, recruit them, ask them questions, give them updates, find them though. If you have a project you want to take on, don't go it alone with you and your co-founder. You'd be surprised how many people would love to just be an advisor on, especially if you have an interesting idea on your board. So awesome. So now you have a team, presumably, and you have some advisors. And now you're thinking about creating your prototype. The first thing you should do is put together detailed user stories. How many of you have heard about detailed user stories? So I don't know how much I should talk about them. Okay, cool, awesome. So detailed user stories are probably the step one of building a prototype. A detailed user story, and I can actually send this to you guys. I didn't realize I should have put this in here. But a detailed user story is basically every scenario that will happen in your product. So again, I'm just going to use CrowdDefend as an example. It is like every scenario. It is the user signs up. That's one user story. User forgets their password. User re-signs in with their new password. User clicks on the donate button. The user gets an update. Like, all these various scenarios that will happen with a user. And of course, this happens, obviously, it's web or mobile or whatever. Spend a lot of time with the detailed user stories. I think my technical co-founder and I probably spent to collect probably 40 hours doing it over the course of two and a half weeks. And it sounds like a lot of time, and it's totally worth it, because once you start building, like if you have a technical co-founder, or if you're outsourcing, say you found like a development team in like India and that you're going to use, this is going to make that development process so much easier. What it's going to do is it's going to give you a full scope of what you're building. You'd be surprised by like how many small like sections there are to any product that you don't realize. You're like, yeah, I'm building a crowdfunding site. Like there are so many small interactions that happen that you don't account for until you do this exercise. Do this exercise. I'll send you guys a template. I'll send it to King so you guys can do this exercise on your own if you'd like to. A really important thing about digital user stories is that you spend long chunks of time with your co-founder, with your technical co-founder, doing this exercise, and do it over the course of a couple weeks. Because you'll be surprised by like how you can sit in a room with someone for 10 hours and think you've gone through every scenario, and then you'll go to sleep and be like, oh crap, we totally forgot about what happens if the user, interacts with like this other user. And then like, yeah, there's so many scenarios that will sort of come to mind. Spend a lot of time doing that. Sorry. Okay. The other thing about creating a prototype, which sounds really obvious, is start small, limit your feature set. Don't try to boil the ocean on your first go. Even if you know that the product you want to build ultimately is going to be much larger in scope, like try to boil it down to sort of the bare necessities. And the detailed user stories section is a great time to do that, because what you can start doing is then start sectioning out things that are like V1, V2, V3, or even if you're not talking about Vs, you can just say like 6 months post-launch, a year post-launch, a year and a half post-launch, whatever it is. Start small. Design for your audience. So this is like once you're like, now you have the detailed user stories, you've already decided what feature set you want for launch, and now you're going to hire a designer, or you are a designer yourself, and you need to start putting together like the UI, this thing, and designing for your audience is you hear this a lot. Like I've heard this at tech talks all the time. It's like, release and see what happens, like put something out in the market. I agree and disagree with that. I think there are certain audiences that will put up with a half-baked product. I think, for example, if you have a very, very service-oriented product that is like literally like, I need food from the A to O and I want it to my classroom now. Like there's not like an emotional appeal there. But then when you talk about products that have any sort of emotional appeal, and that's anything on the e-commerce site, like on the e-commerce side, that's not food, I'd say. Like, so you're buying apparel, whatever. Consumers have a much, much higher standard for design these days. And so if you release a product that's like, hey, like I want you to buy a t-shirt from me, and it's really poorly designed, it's not going to go well. And so I think I wanted to just point that out there, because it's advice that I had gotten like ages ago, was like, oh, just release it and see what happens. It's not a good way to go unless you have like a very service oriented. So just know your audience. If you know that your audience is discerning, design for them. I think that's one of the big things I learned from GiveMob is one of like the most consistent feedbacks I've gotten for GiveMob is, hey, we love the app, we love the functionality of it, it makes giving really easy. We kind of wish that it was like just designed a little bit better. Like we wish the buttons weren't where they are. And it's totally fair feedback, because what I'm trying to do is appeal to somebody's emotions and say, hey, give $5 to this cause. And if they're not like drawn into the app visually, it's really hard to get them to stay. And so design for your audience. These are like really quick, easy ones. Like ask for help as you're doing your prototype. From anyone and everyone. It's also a great way to find advisors. So like as you're like, like you need a conversation starter with like X person, and you're like, it's a great way to be like, hey, I have these prototypes, like, would you mind looking at them? It sounds way more credible than you just being like, I have a business plan, or I have like this paragraph about what I want to do, like show them something. Ask for help. And then like sort of going along with that is get feedback on your prototypes. And I mean that like get feedback from a wide group of, like a large group of people, not just you and your co-founder, your immediate team, but normal people, normal users. And that again sounds really obvious, but you'd be surprised by how many products get released without showing it to at least like 50 people. I think 50 is like the threshold. It really depends on what you're building, of course, but like show it to at least 50 people. They should see it before a line of code is written. And even if it's just like you have to, like if you're building a mobile app, it's super easy because you can literally just do like scroll through. But yeah, get feedback. Don't approach people with the finished product. That's something that I learned the hard way. It was like, I was like, hey, check out my designs, they're awesome. And people are like, yeah, they're great. They look good. And you're like, oh damn, like that's not what I wanted. I wanted more critical feedback. You go to people, even if you think your designs are finished, and say, hey, this is a work in progress. Like you could even I do this now even with crowd defending. We're launching in 3 weeks. I'll show people our design and be like, oh yeah, this is like, we don't even really know. We're just sort of playing around with the design still. We haven't figured out where these buttons go. In our heads we have, but if you tell someone that you haven't, they're much more likely to be like, yeah, that looks terrible. You're totally right. Like you should change that. So get feedback early, get it from many people. Okay, yeah, that's, what am I doing on time?
You're okay.
Okay, cool. So one last thing I'm going to say, which just reminded me off the top of my head, was if you're a non-technical, I highly recommend spending your time, like your professional ROI is going to be much higher if you spend time working or doing design courses. Like if you're non-technical, like the road to becoming a good software engineer is much harder, and there's much more time that has to be put in. But if you spend time like learning design and learning like what design elements work and why they work and like what's trendy now, it's going to be hugely valuable, and it's just way better. Your time is just much better spent. So, I know it's like very popular if people do like code camps, and I think code camps are awesome if you're actually doing a code camp full time for 16 weeks or 12 weeks, whatever your time is. But if you're just like, hey, I'm just a normal student and like I really want to build a product, like learning how to code is an endeavor. But like you can start reading design books and you start reading design blogs and just understand like where things go. Yeah, it's just a better time spent. Okay, that's that. Okay, development, and this is like, sorry. I think about development in 3 different steps. That's why there's 3 very large numbers here. So again, like now you have your designs, like you're thinking about like putting this together, and now you start putting code in, whether it's like mobile or web. I would say for version 1 of your product, take something that's off the shelf. There's so much stuff that's already been committed and shared with online communities. I guarantee what you're building has already been done in some way. I'm not saying that like you haven't done an original idea. I'm sure that it's been done in functionality. Find the easiest, like lowest resource way to test that idea with something off the shelf. Like for example, for Crowd Defend, we did a WordPress theme that was totally free. We just put it on a server. We edited the content. And we showed it to law firms. So we went to law firms and said like, hey, do you have this problem? Like, would this be an interesting format? And we like, we already gave them the long spiel of like, this is where we're starting. We have like a long-term vision. And that was like shockingly enough, the free WordPress theme was shockingly enough to get some of the best and most interesting law firms and legal defense funds in Silicon Valley interested and on board with us, which blew my mind. But I think so as you're going through this process of like thinking about what you want your product to look like, put up a WordPress theme or whatever it is, whatever tool you end up using, but put that up, and this can sort of happen like in parallel because designing a product is not an overnight process. Second thing, your second version, I recommend if you are a non-technical co-founder with a technical co-founder that is either a student or working elsewhere, I highly recommend outsourcing. I've used outsource development for several projects in the past, and there are so many good tools out there for that. So I've used freelancer.com and odesk.com for various projects. And I think there's another one called Freelancer I've never used. But both of those products are really, really good. They're really good in the sense that like, you can find someone to build your product overseas. And if you're smart about the way you hire, which you should be really smart about the way you hire, because there's definitely like some scam artists out there on those platforms. But if you find someone that's like well-rated, and you are going to talk to some of their past clients and you're going to see some of their past work, and I think it's a great way to get started. Just to give you an example, GiveMob, the first version of GiveMob, we built the iOS app, the Android app, the website, so the front-facing website, the back-end content management system, so obviously we have content that goes into the app that we show the user, and the customer relationship software for $1,600. And we had a team of 3 developers in Pakistan do it for like $600, like nothing. Like you can make $600 like working part-time if you're like crazy passionate about your idea. Like go work part-time somewhere or like tutor or whatever it is and have somebody build it for you. And it's just such a like, it's a quicker way to do it. Cause especially if you're a student and you have like this, like, it's like say you find someone in the engineering team, like it'll take them months to put together a product depending on what it is, but you can hire someone overseas and they'll have it to you in like 4 weeks. Much better way to build something, I think, especially if you're not like, if you're a student, like you're not working on this full time. The last thing is version 3, which should definitely be built in-house. Like hire people in-house that are good. Again, thinking of going back to like that conversation we had about like different skills and technical skills and like knowing what language you're building in and what tools you need. Then yeah, version 3 should be built in-house. Like I don't think outsourcing is a long-term strategy for any company, and I don't think that's probably pretty obvious as well. But go through those steps first before you commit yourself to building a product in-house. So the last thing is think big, start small. I highly recommend this. Like I think if you have an idea and you're like, God, this is like huge, like God, like I'm gonna solve something massive here. That's fantastic, but start somewhere else. Like don't try to boil the ocean on your first go with this. I think that if you think critically about what you're building and like the product you're building, I guarantee that there's 10 steps before that you can do to test your idea before you get to that like the sort of like ultimate outcome. Because like what's going to happen is that your ultimate outcome, the ultimate product you want to build and the change you want to create through that product will likely be resource heavy. I mean, that means that you're probably going to have to build like whatever it is, like you're going to have to build, for us, for crowdfund, we have a long-term strategy that involves becoming a litigation loan provider. So eventually we want to be able to provide loans to people that are seeking litigation and then receive a return back on the eventual outcome of that lawsuit. But we're not starting there. We're starting in a very different place. And what that does, it allowed us to build a product really quickly. It allowed us to test this idea, like, is litigation financing is something that's interesting? We think it is because we've been studying the space, but we want to test it with people, and then we hope to get there eventually. And everyone's horizon for that is very different depending on what product you're building. But I definitely think, especially if you're a student, if you're young, like start somewhere small. Think about like what you're building. How can you minimize it to not minimize it, but how can you like sort of reduce or boil it down to something that's much more tangible and concrete than your sort of ultimate outcome. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't think big. I think every company product should have a large vision. And if you don't have a large vision, if you're like, no, this is just really tiny, then you probably shouldn't do it. I think do something that's like going to change the world, even if you're not sure if it will. Like we think access to justice is a problem across the world, and we don't know if we're gonna be able to solve that problem. I don't know if we can provide access to justice for every single individual, but like that's our goal. Like when we talk about our product and like why we're here, we talk about that, but we're starting in a very, very different place, and that just gives us a lot of flexibility. Alrighty, that's it. Thank you so much for having me.
Questions for Hiraa?
You stress the importance of like recruiting your team. Like if you weren't in a university environment, where exactly do you go seek out the right people?
That's a great question. I can only speak to my own experience, but my experience has really been like friends of friends. My technical co-founder actually ended up with someone that is a friend of mine, but the other folks that are working with us are friends of friends, and like I know that's like not the best answer, but really, unfortunately for me, it's come from my own network, and really like thinking critically about your network, and everyone has a bigger network than they like believe they do. So just like really map that out for yourself, and figure out like who might know someone. Like if you have a friend that's a software engineer, he might not be the right fit, or he might have a full-time job, but he might know other software engineers or designers that he's worked with in the past, or
So what if you are trying to do something that involves a lot of partnerships with other entities.
Yeah.
That are like not startups. It's not just consumer side, but in order to like get your product out there or to implement your idea, you have to partner with really big like entities that are already in charge of the systems that you're trying to penetrate. Like as a startup, how do you go about doing that?
Yeah. So we have a similar issue, not similar issue, because we are in the legal space, and we need large law firms and things to come on board with us before we even start raising our investor round, because our investors wanted to know who we were partnering with.
Yeah.
So going back to that whole thing about development and thinking about like version 1, 2, and 3, the best thing you can do for yourself is have something that works, even if it's like that WordPress theme or something you hacked together or you had outsourced. I think, you know, like getting in touch with someone and saying, I don't know, it depends on what you, getting in touch with someone in Coca-Cola and being like, hey, I have this idea, is far different than you sending them a link for like a working website, even if it's really bare. And I think that's the best way to go about it. Is have something that's working so you can show that you are not, you know, just like thinking about the idea, but you're actually committed to it. But yeah, I mean, getting in touch with those people is like a whole nother, you know, like figuring out who those people are is like one thing. You obviously know who those people are, but getting in touch with them is, I don't know. I mean, I don't think there's a good answer for that. It varies so much industry to industry.
So do you think that like that could possibly reduce like what if they take your idea? Like if it's an idea that you're offering, then like, you know, this would be something that they could possibly acquire and like implement into their systems already, but like by you telling them, kind of giving it away.
Yeah, so this is something I was told very early on years ago by a professor actually here. Don't ever be afraid to tell someone your idea, and even if you're like, damn, they're gonna steal it, because if they can do it better than you, then you probably didn't want to build it to begin with. You know what I mean? Like, if they were gonna take it and like they have some sort of strategic advantage, you would have come out with the product and they would build it and they would beat you anyways. I think that you have to have a position that makes sense in the market, you know, and say like, again, like really depends. Like for us, our position is that, well, yeah, never mind. I'm not going to. We have some, I would say, like unique connections that make us well suited for this. But you have to figure out like what you bring to the table. But I mean, that's. Any other questions?
Like one of the problems when you're trying to outsource your app or web development, for example, is like exactly communicating your vision to the other person.
Yeah.
How did you in your project do?
Yeah, so the detailed user studies, that's why I stress those are like so important, because when you're talking about what your vision is, your outsourced developer doesn't care what your vision is. They want to know like what your product is. Like they don't need to know like how you're trying to change the world. So when you do that detailed user studies story, there is no room for error. Like that's why I said, do it, spend a lot of time on it, spend weeks on it, like that is like your baby for multiple weeks. Make sure that detailed user stories, those detailed user stories are exhaustive. Like there is no other scenario that can take place in that product that you don't know about. And then you're golden, because your developer can't be like, well, like you didn't tell me about this, and like now I got to add this on. Like if you give it to them up front, and that it's a much harder process than people realize. Like, you know, because there are a lot of elements, especially when you're talking about like a web platform where there's, you know, like you have so much more space on web, and there's so many places you can go. I think it's a little bit easier on mobile, because mobile is like more compact. Like usually it's like swipe right or swipe left, or you log in, or like so. Do that exercise, and that's how you'll communicate your vision to them.
So GiftMob, is that still running right now?
It is, yeah.
And the pictures you showed us, is that what version of that is that?
That was version 1.
Okay.
And version 2 is launching hopefully in December. Yeah.
So that was built by the programmers from Pakistan.
No. So when I talk, yes, it was.
Okay.
Yeah, it was developed by them.
Cool.
The design was not done by them.
Did you do the design?
I worked on the design with a advisor who's technically an advisor on our GiftMob board. Because I mean, usually, if you're outsourcing something, most design shops don't have designers in-house. You usually have to like do the designs, complete the PSD files, which are like the actual PSD files, and then send them all that stuff. So we did that first, but yeah, again, like the first version of Give Mob was like this is what I want it to look like. We got tons of feedback the last couple of months on the design, and hope to sort of really change it up.
It is Give Mob. It's a nonprofit.
It is, yeah.
So do you guys take a small portion of the donations to support yourselves, or?
So we actually don't take anything right now. We want to move into that space, but not quite yet. I think we still have a lot to prove in the market. And I think that there is. I think nonprofits specifically want to see a lot more from us in terms of growth and product before we can command that percentage.
Do you have any statistics on how much money's been donated through?
Yeah. So we right now have about a little bit over $6,000 that have been donated on our platform, which is pretty awesome if you think about $5-10 increments. So yeah, I think it's a really exciting number. And if you think about like our product just being like V1, it's literally like V1. It's not even 1.1 or 1.2. It's like the first thing that we released. But you know, we again, like when we was talking about just having like, you know, thinking big but starting small. That's how I really think about Give Mob. I think Give Mob is like starting small, and like we have I and the other advisors have a much more like long-term vision of where this ends up. Like we want to be the space, like the way people give on mobile, and we want to eventually become our own payment provider and all of that too. So yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways. Sorry, that was way more than you asked for.
Thank you.
But, yeah. Any? Sure.
Back to Give Mob.
Yeah.
How is it set up to work right now? You have the app, and then you personally have different groups you like to donate to, or do you guys promote different campaigns through it?
Yeah. So we feature a new nonprofit every day. It's almost like a Groupon Guilt model. We have a new nonprofit every day. We keep the last 5 campaigns active, and once you sort of you'll get a notification every morning saying like donate $5 or $10 depending on that campaign to these specific asks. So you know, like Ebola, for example, has been in the news quite a bit. We have a lot of nonprofits that have reached out to us for Ebola. So donate $10 for medical supplies for Ebola victims or whatever that is, and then you donate in app. In the second version, we're actually keeping the last 7 days active rather than the last 5 days. What we found was that folks really like to give on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, and go look through like the last week. So yeah. And our website, which is www.givemobapp.org, walks you through the whole process to like how this works.
Last question, if anyone has one.
So how do you research the validity of the organizations? Because if it's just some, Ponzi scheme, and then, the backlash would go to you.
Yeah, so there's actually 2 really easy checks. GuideStar, which is like the destination for nonprofit. I check everyone, like myself, like somebody will go in and check GuideStar, make sure they register a nonprofit, and make sure that they are in good standing with GuideStar. And the really easy thing for us, because it's text to donate, and this also goes back to the reason why Apple had banned in-app charitable donations, or has banned in-app charitable donations. Text to donate gets checked by the payment provider, your cell phone carrier as well. So that's super easy for us. What that does is like it takes a lot of pressure off us. So if you donated $10 in app to UNICEF, your carrier, like let's say Verizon, would actually have to double check that and say like, yeah, UNICEF, like this code matches UNICEF. So we obviously do our own checks, and then Verizon, which is like really damn good at doing that, does that again. There's also a third check that happens before the money is dispersed by an independent not-for-profit, and then it's dispersed. So there are like multiple checks.
You have a new foundation every single day.
We do. Yeah.
So you're constantly training.
I do, yeah. But the good thing is for us, we have a great content management system. So we can set up campaigns like well in advance of the date that they need to be aired. So the content goes in, we select the date that they'll be airing, we let the nonprofit partner know, and on that date it'll appear. So yeah, sure.
Please help me to thank you.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Turning.
I don't know if children are